Dear learners, now let us discuss how to prepare the reports for NGOs. Now this is one of the important aspects which the NGOs deal with, and this is the last part, and we are running in the last week of our session, and this is the last block of the self-learning material we have. So we need to understand that how to prepare the reports. We have understood the concept of NGOs, the formation of NGOs, various activities related to the NGOs, the elements of strategy in NGOs, the SWOT analysis, discussing the strengths and weaknesses, everything we have discussed. We have discussed the application of ICTs, etc. But now we need to understand that why is it important to prepare the reports, and what are the report, and what are the different guidelines for preparing a report for NGOs. So reporting is very important aspect for NGOs. Though people think that it is a trivial activity or it is a very casual activity, but it is very important to understand the whole concept of preparing a report. So when we talk about reporting, it is basically a secondary task, no doubt. But then apart from being a secondary task, it is important because you have to do a kind of documentation after the project is being implemented. So the project implementation is considered to be a major task, and this is considered to be a secondary and the casual task. But this is very important because this documentation helps in understanding how the project started, where from the funding came, what are the aspects related to the project, how the project was implemented, why the project was started, what was the reason of starting the project, etc. So all the documentation is done in reporting. So when we talk about reporting, it is very important to understand why, when, how things happened. So when we discuss the strategic aspects also, this is also related to the strategic aspects. So this is kind of documentation to assess the present situation of the project, how the project is being implemented, how the project is going to be in future. So reporting is basically a secondary task, but it is very important. So everybody should do the reporting part. So report writing is very important for NGOs, though sometimes what happens is they don't understand the importance of reporting. So what happens is when the NGOs, they don't keep the documentation in form of reports. It can be in different aspects. It can be annual reports, it can be monthly reports, it can be quarterly reports, or whatever the case may be. So if they don't have the documentation, then if you want to go back to the projects, and if you want to go or compare the past projects with the present projects, then it becomes very difficult. So that is why reporting is very important, and it is a kind of a documentation. So when we talk about reporting, so the reports, they reflect the work done on the field. So basically the whole reports, now I'll just give you a very simple example to make you understand the whole concept. When we were kids, or even now, when you're doing the course on the introduction to NGO management, suppose you give the exam and you get the certification, you get the grades, or you get the marks. Now that is also a report card, right? So now that is a documentation of what you have already done and how the work has been assessed. The progress of work has been reported. Even when we were in school, when we were kids, we used to get the report cards with the marks related to different subjects, and those marks were provided to you based on your progress, how you performed, how you fared in exams, etc. So this is what is reporting. So it basically reflects the actual work which is done on the field, and it provides you a great opportunity to present and share the work to a wider audience. Because when you're implementing the project, it is basically the internal aspect, because it is done for the NGOs, and after the implementation of the project, whatever the activities are being taken, those things only are known. But when you share your work in form of reports, it reaches to a wider, anybody and everybody can just to whomsoever you want to share with, you can just present them this report, and that report gives all the details which we will be seeing in further slides. So writing a good report helps the NGOs a lot. Even the individuals, it helps. So we need to understand that reporting is very important. It reflects the work done in the field, and it provides an opportunity to share good work, and of course it is a documentation of good work already done. So now let us discuss what are the various guidelines to write a report, and there are certain elements into it which we need to follow. It is not mandatory, I won't say that, or it is it's there a hard and fast rule to follow those steps, but whatever is being told as guidelines, if they are followed, they result into a good report. So that is why reporting is very, very important. Now these are the guidelines which are in general given to write a report. Some may be missing, some may be added, some guidelines may be added as per the need of the report, but these are the basic guidelines. Now starting with the first guideline, that is accuracy. So when you start writing the report, one should keep in mind that whatever documentation is being done should be accurate in nature. Accuracy is important because anything and everything cannot go into the report. So it is important for us to understand that why the accurate information should go, because there are facts, there are data, there are certain figures which are involved in the report. So they should be the numbers, all the quantitative terms which are used for NGOs should be accurate enough to describe a particular report. Then coming to the next part, and that is communication. Communication is another aspect which is very, very important. Now, like I am communicating to you, so as a feedback, you can go through the video and you can just give the feedback that this video was good enough, or this video was not so good enough, or the lecture was good or lecture was not so good. Why? Because the communication, if it is good, that means the communication is good. If it is not so good, that means the communication is not so good. So that is why it is very, very important that a proper communication mode is maintained while writing a report. It should be very clear. The clarity in communication should be there. Complex sentences should be avoided, because if you have the complex sentence, the whole information may reach to a paragraph, and that is very difficult to understand. Because everybody will not have the same mentality as the person who is writing the report. So that is why communication is a very, very important aspect. That means it should be communicable enough that it is understandable and there is a clarity in the whole concept. The third guideline, which is very important, is that, as I said, the complex sentences should be avoided. The reports should be very brief. The report should be precise. That comes under accuracy. It should be precise with all the facts. It should be brief in nature, and it should have a clear-cut title. The report should not have a jargon. The report should not have some misguiding titles or miscommunicating titles which do not relate to the project. So that is why it should be short but should have a clear title. When we talk about language, we have talked about communication, how you communicate with people while writing the report. What kind of conversation should be there in the report? That is important. But when we talk about language, again, the language should be very, very simple. Because when we talk about English language, there's a Shakespearean language also. There are complicated words also which can be used. But if you use those words, it is not understandable to many people. So in that case, that language doesn't have any value. So the language should be simple and precise, and it should communicate the right message to the audience or the target audience. So that is very important. Now, another aspect, another guideline is the routine nature. Reports are usually the routine nature, and they should be followed and made in the routine activities. So it should not be that if the project is completed, whenever the project is completed, then only I am going to make the report. No, it should be a routine activity to make the report. Now when we talk about another guidelines, you see all the guidelines are related to the communication and the language part. We come to the paragraphs. Now the paragraphs are very important, like the paragraph should not be very long or should not be very short. So they should be balanced enough. Like when you're writing the introduction about a project, or you're giving a summary of a project, that how the project started, what are the guidelines, and how it was implemented, that the paragraph should be broken into pieces. The paragraph should be broken in such a manner that they are communicable to the target audience. It should be concise. It should not be elaborated in such a sense that it is scattered, it looks scattered. It should be precise and concise in nature. Another part which is very important in guidelines is that you need to include the recommendations. Recommendations are very important because there are lessons learned from the reporting or report writing aspects. So whatever the lessons are learned, that becomes the recommendations for further or future organizations also, or for future projects also. So recommendations are very important. And of course the last part is the signature and the date, because it is a documentation, so signature and date should be there. Now these are the guidelines, these are the parameters which are, it's not hard and fast, but if they are followed, they relate to a good report. Now coming to the procedure of reporting. The procedure of reporting, first we discussed the guidelines. Now we will say that why we need to write the report and what is the process of writing a report. So when we talk about the process or the procedure of reporting, these are certain points which needs to be kept in mind, and it depends on the way the report is being written, the purpose of the report, and the aim of or the objectives of the organization. All these should be kept in mind while deciding the process of reporting. But these points which I'm going to explain to you, these points are basically the set points, or which on an average every reports they cover. Now the first part is determine the purpose of the report. Now why are you writing a report? So we need to focus on the idea. We'll be seeing these aspects in further slides also. So we need to understand what is the purpose of report. Why do you require a report? Whether it is required or not. There are certain cases where the report is not actually required. So the purpose has to be defined clearly, that why the report is being written. That is why in the guidelines it is clearly mentioned that you should have a short report and the clear title should be mentioned, because if you mention a proper title, that describes the purpose of the organization and purpose of writing the report also. You have to identify the receivers. That means the target audience has to be identified. In certain cases it is internal, and in certain cases it is external. While writing a process, as I said, that accuracy is very important. So therefore the collection of data is very necessary. The facts and figures should be in place as per the need of the organization, and these data has to be analyzed and classified properly, because these data only gives the idea that how the procedure is working. Now for example, we had taken number of cases, and for example we took an NGO where we reported that the website says that these number of children have been educated, or these number of child has been educated in past 1 year. Where did they get the data from? So they had collected the necessary data, they analyzed it, and then they classified it so that they can place it on their website for reporting purpose. You have to mention the outline of the report, which we'll see later. What are the parameters, or what are the titles which should go inside the outline of the report, and based on that the report has to be prepared. And then you have to prepare the final report and then present the report. So when we discuss the procedure or process of reporting, these are the elements which needs to be considered while writing the report. That is important. Now let us take some examples and how to prepare a general project report for NGOs, because project reports are the most common forms of reporting for NGOs. So that is why we are taking here as project reports. Now there are certain project reports, like we have attitude while writing a report. Now these are certain aspects which needs to be covered while writing a project report. Now in this case, if you see, there's a feel-good factor. So whenever you are doing anything or any work, you should feel good about it. So while writing a report also, one should feel good, because not considering it as a trivial job, not considering it as a casual job, or not considering it as a secondary task, because reporting is also important. So the person who is writing the report should be in a state of mind that he or she should feel good about it, because the report involves a lot of intricacies. We talked about the data, we talked about the collection of data, the analysis of the data, we talked about presenting the report in a particular format. So all these things, they are intricate in nature and they are to be weaved in properly to explain the report. The other aspect is like it is an opportunity to share your work, and therefore feeling good is very, very important. So in this case, what will happen is like there is another aspect, another part while writing a project report is that you have to focus on the objective of the report. Like what kind of report it is, whether it helps in structuring the report or not, and you have to filter the unnecessary descriptions. It should not be elaborate, it should not be long enough, and it should maintain the specificity. That means it is for a specific purpose. So we had discussed all this in guidelines, but when we write a project report, these should be kept in mind. You need to decide the target audience. Who should be your receiver? That was the first part we discussed. So we need to understand for whom the report is being written. In certain cases, the report is being written for in-house audience, like it is meant only for the organization. These are internal reports. And if you are writing it for the external audience, like I gave you an example, they reported the data. So that means that report was meant for us. The report was meant for the external audience. So report can be in the form of external report also. So that is why you need to discuss the target audience also. When we are writing the general project report for NGOs, one should start quite early. It's not that they should wait for the project completion, or they should wait for a certain aspect to be completed. As soon as the project comes, step by step, the report should be started and the report should be written. So report writing should start as early as possible, and even while working or the work is in progress, the report can be written about the work which has already been done. And this results in saving the time, and it improves the efficacy of the report because it becomes very specific and the report is completed on time. So that is very, very important in writing general project reports. Now these are different types of reports. We won't be discussing all the types of reports. So there are sources which discuss these reports, and some NGOs, they go in for monthly reports, some NGOs go in for quarterly reports, and some NGOs go in for annual reports. Usually annual reports are being done by all the NGOs, because even in the business circle, all the organizations, they have annual reports. Now if the NGO is big enough, then they can have monthly and quarterly reports also, because they have number of projects associated with them. But in case of small NGOs, the annual reports work, because these annual reports even help in in auditing the results and the assessing the funds also. So that is why the annual reports, that means the report written once in a year. Monthly is once in a month and quarterly once in 4 months. So these are the different types of reports. Now we come to the last part of a report, which is known as the project completion report. So we need to understand why we need to write a completion report, because completion report in itself is a big report. So it is also a formal document which says that other reports which we were doing when the work was in progress. Now this report is a formal document which says that the project is now closed, and it is a must for anyone or any NGO, and it must be prepared and preserved, because the closure of a project gives an idea that this project has come to an end. Whether it is successful or not so successful, it depends. But usually the project closing report is made in every organization, and specifically in NGOs. Now these are the contents, or these are the index which needs to go in project completion report. Again, it is a general concept, and it can be tweaked as per the needs of the organization. Some can be included in one group also. So these are some of the parameters or some of the indexing which needs to be done in project completion report. There should be a title page which gives the crisp idea what is the title of the project. There should be table of contents. Table of contents include various elements of the projects, and it should start with overview of the projects. It should mention the results and outcomes. It should highlight the importance of the project or the main points of the project. It should give the lessons learned, and it should relate to the best practices in appendix. That is a comparative study. Some NGOs do have the best practices, and those best practices can be appended in the project completion report. So this is all about the guidelines of writing a report for NGOs. Now in another section we would be discussing different types of reports. There are long reports, short reports, so we would be discussing it specifically, and we will try to figure it out that how the NGOs they comply with report writing. Thank you so much.